I never imagined something like this could happen to me. My name is Anne Valeria. It all started when I was heading to my shift in the emergency room, like any other day, when everything turned upside down. I clearly remember the car coming towards me so quickly, I didn't even have time to move. It all happened in an instant. And then, darkness. It wasn't like passing out. It was like life was just ripped away from me without warning. When I woke up, I wasn't in my body. I wasn't in any familiar place. I just felt peace, an absence of pain, and a sense that time simply didn't exist there. I didn't know where I was, but I didn't feel scared. It was as if everything was calm. The first face I saw was my father's. He had passed away when I was still young, and I never imagined I would meet him in a place like that. He smiled at me with such a gentle expression, as if time and death had never separated us. And beside him, something even more unbelievable happened. Jesus appeared. The light emanating from him seemed to surround everything. It was a presence that couldn't be explained with words. He didn't speak at first, but the feeling I had was of a deep peace that my soul seemed to understand without the need for explanations. His eyes met mine, and I knew that something very important was about to be revealed to me. He gave me a mission, a purpose. He wanted me to share with people what I had seen and learned, to help those who were still blind to the distractions of this world. At that moment, I knew that my life would never be the same. I didn't know how to explain what was happening. It was as if I were between two worlds, yet at the same time, I felt clarity about everything. Jesus showed me something that still sends chills down my spine just remembering it. What I saw in that place was a reflection of the world we live in, but in a completely different way. I saw people, all of them, so immersed in their screens, in social media, in things that, deep down, don't matter. He told me that distraction was one of the enemy's greatest weapons, using all of this to blind people and steer them away from what truly matters: faith, truth, and love. He spoke about the shallowness of modern life, how we are all so focused on the now, but forgetting what comes after. He wanted me to warn people, to stop living on autopilot and start looking at what is eternal. Then the vision shifted. I saw a new scene, a dark place filled with faces of people following leaders who promised peace and unity, but were actually deceiving everyone. These leaders spoke empty promises, but no one noticed. The scariest part was seeing how the lies spread, how people were willing to follow anything that seemed comfortable without questioning. Jesus explained to me that these leaders were not from him, that many would be drawn to their soft words, but deep down, they were losing their way. He told me to warn people to ground themselves in his word, which is the only unshakable truth. When I saw that vision, I felt a deep pain. People were blind, walking toward the abyss without even realizing it. Then the vision changed again, and I saw something that scared me even more. A wave of renewal was beginning to spread, but it wasn't easy. People were returning to God, seeking the truth, giving themselves to prayer and worship. It was like a movement of light in the midst of darkness, but there was also a lot of suffering. The people who were waking up, those who had strayed from the faith for so long, were facing persecution. I saw Christians being attacked, some even killed for their faith. I saw faces of people who were willing to do anything for what they believed, and despite the pain, they remained steadfast, with a peace that can only come from God. Jesus told me, in a calm voice, that those who remained faithful would be rewarded, but it would be a constant struggle. Deep down, I knew that those images, those people, were the true resistance against the coming evil. And then, I saw the end of everything. Jesus returning. It wasn't just any vision. It wasn't just an idea or a thought. I saw the earth go silent, every eye turned toward him, as if the entire universe was waiting for that moment. He appeared in glory, surrounded by legions of angels, and the sky seemed to tremble with his presence. Every person, in every corner of the world kneeled, and every tongue declared that he was the Lord. That moment was so powerful, so magnificent, that I could hardly understand the magnitude of what was happening. I knew in a deep and undeniable way that this would be the end of everything as we know it. It was the second coming of Christ, the moment when everything would be resolved and people would be separated for eternity, depending on how they had lived their lives. At that moment, I saw the great division between those who were prepared and those who were lost, and I couldn't help but feel immense sadness for those who weren't ready. When I woke up, still in shock, I didn't know what to think. The experience was so intense, so real, that it felt like a distant memory. But at the same time, something that happened just yesterday. I was back in the hospital, surrounded by the typical sounds of an emergency room, the beeping of monitors, the comings and goings of doctors and nurses. But the peace I had felt while I was in that divine place still lingered within me. The people around me had no idea what I had experienced, but something inside me told me I had to share it. Not with everyone, but with those who were willing to listen. I had a purpose now, something much bigger than any medical emergency I'd ever dealt with. The message of Jesus still echoed in my mind, and I knew I couldn't ignore it. My life, as I knew it, would never make sense the same way again. The hardest part of all this was dealing with people's reactions after I started telling them what I had witnessed. Some looked at me as if I were losing my mind. Others, with skepticism, tried to find a logical explanation for it, as if it were a dream or a hallucination. Some even ridiculed me, saying I should focus more on my job and less on these far-fetched stories. But deep down, I knew that the truth I was carrying couldn't be silenced. I had to talk about the distractions of the world, about how people were blinded by the fleeting things, and how we must prepare for Christ's return. It wasn't easy facing the harsh stares and ironic smiles. But the truth was with me, and it didn't matter what others thought. I knew my mission was just beginning. Over time, I began to notice something strange, something I didn't know how to explain. Every time I spoke about the experience, more people started to come into my life, seeking something they didn't even know what it was. Some came looking for answers, others wanted to understand why I was so convinced of everything. What I said seemed to move people in a way I couldn't fully comprehend. But at the same time, doubts started to arise, even within me. Was I doing the right thing? Was this my true mission? All I knew was that what I had lived, what I had witnessed, was far bigger than any doubt or insecurity. That place, that moment with Jesus, still filled me, and I knew my life could never be the same again. I hope this translation fits what you're looking for. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments or further clarifications. And then something truly unexpected happened. In one of those meetings where I shared my experience with some close friends, something changed. I was explaining the distractions of the world, how we are so focused on what is superficial, when one of them suddenly stood up, visibly shaken. She looked at me, and without saying a word, she kneeled. It wasn't something I expected. In that moment, I realized that my mission wasn't just about speaking, it was also about witnessing real change in people. What I saw there, at that instant, was a reflection of everything Jesus had shown me. People were starting to wake up. It wasn't an immediate change, but a spark being lit in many souls. Sometimes, the real impact comes from small actions, ones that transform one life at a time. As time passed, I began to understand that my journey wasn't always going to be easy. There were moments when the feeling of speaking to a distracted and uninterested audience consumed me. People continued to cling to their phones, obsessed with the next social media update, always chasing the next thing, while the things that really mattered were ignored. But then I remembered something very important. The true work wasn't about the numbers. It wasn't about everyone understanding right away. It was about those who were ready to listen, those who would seek the truth even if it was difficult. And that was enough to keep going. And then, one night, something deep inside of me clicked. I was sitting alone in my apartment, overwhelmed by the weight of everything, when I felt a presence so strong that it almost felt tangible. It was as if I wasn't alone in that room anymore. Suddenly, I saw Jesus again, standing right before me, arms outstretched, as if inviting me to keep going. Without saying a word, he reminded me that my mission had not changed. He showed me a scene of people slowly awakening. It wouldn't be instant, but a spark would ignite within many souls. I realized then that the work wasn't about immediate results, but about planting seeds. Sometimes the most powerful change comes in quiet moments, and it takes time to see it. I understood that even when I felt alone or discouraged, I had to keep sharing, because the truth would find its way, even if it was just one person at a time. That moment was a turning point for me. It wasn't just about speaking to others anymore. It was about living the truth I had seen and felt. My life had shifted completely. I wasn't just a nurse anymore. I was a messenger. I knew now that the distractions that consume our lives are nothing compared to the eternal truths that await us. I no longer felt the pressure of needing to change the whole world in one go. My mission was clear: to continue sharing, to be faithful to the message that had been given to me. The return of Christ wasn't just something I had witnessed in a vision. It was real, and I had a responsibility to help others prepare for it. And so, despite the challenges, I kept going, knowing that even in the darkest moments, the truth would always shine through. As time went on, I began to feel more at peace with my role in all of this. I was no longer so consumed by the doubts that once plagued me. Every day, I became more sure of the mission I had been given. There were still moments of frustration, days when I felt like I wasn't making a difference. But then I would meet someone who was starting to wake up, who had heard what I said and was seeking the truth. These were the moments that made it all worth it. I had learned that the most powerful changes often happen in the quietest, most personal moments. And every time I saw someone open their heart to God, I knew that my efforts, no matter how small, were part of a much bigger picture. The more I shared my experience, the more I realized that I wasn't alone in this journey. People were starting to listen, to understand that the distractions of this world were nothing compared to the peace and truth that awaited us. But I also knew that there was still so much more to be done. There would always be those who would reject the message, who would prefer to stay in their comfortable distractions. Yet I felt a deep sense of peace knowing that I had done my part, that I had shared the truth as it had been given to me. And even if the world continued to be consumed by the noise of everyday life, I knew that my mission was to stay firm in my faith and to continue shining the light of truth for those who were ready to see it. As I kept moving forward, I began to see even more clearly the challenges ahead. It wasn't just about sharing my experience anymore. It was about showing people how to live differently, how to turn away from the endless distractions and find the peace that I had witnessed. It became less about words and more about action. I knew that people needed to see a change in me. They needed to witness the power of living with purpose, with faith. I had to embody the message, not just preach it. It wasn't easy. There were still moments of doubt, times when I questioned if I was making a real difference. But in those moments, I remembered the faces of the people who had started to wake up, and that was enough to push me forward. What struck me the most, though, was how many people I met who were secretly struggling with the same emptiness I had once felt. They were just too distracted to even acknowledge it. They were searching for meaning in all the wrong places, drowning in the noise of life. And here I was, offering the only thing that could fill that void: truth, purpose, faith. Slowly, I began to see how this journey wasn't just about the message I was sharing, but about the personal transformations happening all around me. People were waking up, some with open hearts, others after a long struggle. But they were waking up, and I knew that was the true power of what I had been shown. It wasn't about me. It was about God's message reaching those who were ready to hear it, ready to change. As I continued down this path, I realized something that I hadn't fully understood before. This wasn't just a one-time revelation. It was a continuous journey, one that would challenge me every day. The world didn't change overnight, and neither did the people in it. The distractions were still everywhere, and at times, it felt like a battle I couldn't win. But even in the toughest moments, I reminded myself of what Jesus had shown me, that the truth would eventually find its way, even if it was one person at a time. And those small victories, those moments of clarity and awakening in others, made everything worthwhile. I started to see the fruits of my labor in ways I hadn't expected. The conversations I had, the stories shared, the people who came to me for guidance. Those were the moments that kept me going. It wasn't always easy, and there were days when the weight of it all felt too much to bear. But as I watched people make changes, reconnect with their faith, and live more purposefully, I knew I was doing what I was meant to do. I also realized that while the world was still deeply distracted, there was a quiet but powerful movement happening underneath it all. People were beginning to see through the noise. They were looking beyond the distractions, searching for something deeper, something eternal. Over time, I came to understand that the work I was doing wasn't about the immediate impact or widespread change. It was about planting seeds, offering people a chance to see beyond their distractions and reconnect with what truly mattered. Not everyone would listen, not everyone would hear the message, but those who did, those whose hearts were ready, would carry it with them. And that was enough for me. I realized that my purpose wasn't to convince everyone, but to show them the way. It was up to each individual to decide whether they wanted to take that path. The more I spoke, the more I met people who, like me, had felt lost in the noise of the world. But the beautiful thing was, they were finding their way back. Slowly, people began to prioritize their faith, their relationships, and their connection with God over the fleeting distractions that once consumed them. It wasn't a perfect transformation, and it wasn't always easy, but it was happening. And in those quiet moments, when I saw someone take a step toward a deeper understanding, I knew that everything I had experienced, everything I had shared, was worth it. My journey, my mission, had just begun, and there was still so much work to do. But I was ready. As the days went by, the urgency of the message I had received became even clearer. I realized that this wasn't just about me or the people around me. It was about something much larger. There was a world out there, caught in the same distractions, searching for meaning in all the wrong places. And while I couldn't reach everyone, I had a responsibility to keep spreading the truth to those who would listen. The message I had been given wasn't just a story. It was a warning and an invitation. People needed to prepare, to open their eyes to the reality that was unfolding all around them. I began to feel a deeper sense of peace with my mission, but also a sense of urgency. It wasn't enough to wait for people to come to me. I had to go to them, to meet them where they were. I started engaging with more people from all walks of life. Some were skeptical, some were curious, but each conversation felt like a small step toward a larger awakening. And although I faced rejection, skepticism, and even mockery at times, there was a quiet voice within me, reminding me that my purpose was to plant seeds, to share the truth, and to trust that those who were meant to hear it would. As I continued to share the message, I realized that it wasn't just about preaching or convincing others. It was about living authentically. People could sense when someone was genuinely living out their faith, and that spoke louder than any words. I tried to embody the message of hope, peace, and readiness in every aspect of my life. I started focusing more on how I treated others, how I managed my own distractions, and how I kept my eyes fixed on what truly mattered. My actions became the most powerful testimony to the truth I was sharing. And while it wasn't always easy, I felt a profound sense of fulfillment in knowing that I was walking the path I was meant to walk. But it wasn't always clear where this path was leading. There were days when I felt weary, when I doubted if anyone was really listening, if anyone was truly hearing the message. But then, out of nowhere, someone would reach out, someone would share how my words had made a difference in their life, how they had started seeing things differently, how they were awakening to the reality that was often hidden behind the distractions. Those moments, though small, reminded me that the work was worth it. I wasn't just speaking into a void. People were waking up, and I was a part of that. That was all I needed to keep going, even on the toughest days. As the weeks passed, I started to notice more changes in myself as well. It wasn't just about sharing the message anymore. It was about living it fully. The distractions that once consumed me, that pulled my attention in 1,000 different directions, began to lose their hold. I started to see the beauty in the small moments, in the quiet acts of love and kindness, in the simple joys that we so often overlook in our busy lives. I realized that living with intention, with purpose, was the true way to find peace. And in this process, I found a deeper connection with God, with the people around me, and with my own purpose in life. But even as I found peace in my own journey, I knew there was still so much to be done. The world was still full of distractions, full of people who were lost in the noise. I couldn't save everyone, and that was a hard truth to accept. But I knew that the seed I had planted, the message I had shared, would continue to grow in the hearts of those who were ready to receive it. I realized that my role wasn't to force change on anyone, but to offer a glimpse of the truth, a chance for others to see the world in a different light. Whether or not they took that opportunity was up to them, but I had done my part. And in the end, that's all any of us can do. Share what we've learned, plant the seeds, and trust that God will do the rest. As I reflected on everything I had been through, I realized that this journey was not just about sharing a message, but about my own personal transformation. Each day, I was becoming more attuned to the stillness, to the moments of peace that exist even in the chaos. The distractions that once seemed so important were starting to fade away, and I found myself focusing more on what truly matters: faith, love, and the eternal truths that never change. I no longer felt the need to prove anything to anyone or to seek validation in the approval of others. The peace I had experienced in that divine realm, the clarity I received, had become my guiding light. And as I continued to walk this path, I knew that no matter the obstacles, I was on the right course. Still, I knew the world was filled with noise. People were still caught in the rush of daily life, distracted by the constant bombardment of information, entertainment, and technology. But I also knew that there was a deeper hunger within people, one that could not be satisfied by anything in this world. I continued to share the message, but more quietly now, letting my actions speak louder than words. I focused on living in a way that reflected the peace and love I had found. And as I did, I noticed more and more people starting to ask questions, beginning to seek something greater than the world could offer. It was as if, one by one, people were starting to wake up. And though I couldn't reach everyone, I found peace knowing that I had done what I was meant to do. One thing I've learned through all of this is that change doesn't happen overnight, and it's not always obvious. But sometimes, a small shift in someone's heart, a little moment of clarity, can make all the difference. The more I kept my focus on living authentically, on being the example of the message I had been given, the more I saw the ripple effect of those small changes. People were beginning to reevaluate their priorities, their distractions, and they were seeking something real. I wasn't doing anything extraordinary, but I realized that in sharing my experience, in showing others the peace I had found, I was part of something bigger than myself. I was contributing to a movement of awakening, one soul at a time. The beauty of it all was that it wasn't about forcing people to change, but about creating an environment where they could make that choice for themselves. Some people would continue to ignore the signs, to stay trapped in the cycle of distractions. But others, those whose hearts were ready, would begin to see the truth. I had come to understand that I was just a messenger. The rest was up to God. My responsibility was to stay faithful, to keep sharing the truth, and to trust that the seeds I planted would eventually bear fruit. It was a quiet, ongoing process, but I had no doubt that it was having an impact, even if I couldn't always see it. As I continued on this path, I realized that it wasn't always going to be easy, and that was okay. There would be days when the distractions of the world seemed overwhelming, when I'd question whether anyone was really hearing what I had to say. But I also knew that every small change mattered. Every heart that was opened, every person who started to question their priorities made all the difference. I started to accept that my mission wasn't about immediate results or widespread transformation. It was about being consistent, faithful, and patient. I didn't need to see everything unfold right in front of me. I just needed to keep doing what I knew was right and trust that it would all come together in its own time. I felt more grounded in my purpose than ever before. The peace I had experienced in that divine place, the message I had received from Jesus, was now a part of me, not just something I talked about. It had become the foundation of everything I did. I understood now that the distractions of the world would always exist. They are part of what we face as human beings, but they don't have to control us. We can choose what we focus on, what we allow to shape our lives. And while the world around me continued to be loud and chaotic, I had found my own quiet place of peace, and I was determined to help others find it too. As I spent more time reflecting on everything I had witnessed and lived through, I began to realize how much the experience had truly transformed me. I was no longer the same person I was before. Everything had shifted, from the way I viewed the world to the way I interacted with others. I didn't need the approval or validation of anyone anymore. The peace I had felt in that divine realm was something I carried within me now. It became the lens through which I saw the world. No longer was I swept up in the endless noise. Instead, I found myself drawn to quieter moments, to deeper connections with people, and to living with intention. It wasn't just about sharing the message anymore. It was about living it. And as I did, I noticed something incredible. People began to notice the change in me. They could sense it in my actions, in the way I spoke, and in the way I carried myself. They began to ask questions. They wanted to know more about what had made me so different. And in those moments, I had the chance to share the message that had been given to me. Slowly, but surely, the seeds I had planted were beginning to sprout. The world wasn't going to change overnight, but I knew that every person who began to see the truth, who started to wake up from the distractions, was a victory. And for each of those victories, I felt deeply grateful. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that even the smallest changes in people's lives could lead to something much bigger. It wasn't about reaching thousands or making an instant impact. It was about the ripple effect. Every person who heard the message and began to reflect on their life, every person who took a step closer to the truth, was one more step toward a larger awakening. And while I could never know exactly where this journey would take me, I knew I was exactly where I needed to be. It was no longer about me and my doubts. It was about the lives that were being touched, the hearts that were opening. That, in itself, was enough. I also realized that there was no definitive end to this path. The work wasn't something that would ever truly be finished. There would always be more distractions to overcome, more people to reach, more souls to awaken. But what I had learned from my experience was that I didn't need to do it all at once. Change takes time, and sometimes it's the quiet, everyday moments that have the most profound impact. I would continue to share what I had seen, to speak about the truth I had been shown, but I also understood that I was a part of something far greater. The world might seem lost in its distractions, but there was always hope, and that hope was worth fighting for. And as I kept moving forward, I began to realize that this journey, this mission, wasn't something I could ever truly finish on my own. I wasn't supposed to carry the weight of it by myself. I was part of a larger story, a much bigger picture. There were other people out there, other souls who had experienced similar awakenings, who had heard that call to share the truth, to live authentically. I wasn't alone in this. We were all working together, each in our own way, to help others see what truly matters. The distractions would always be there, but so would the truth. It was up to us to make sure it was heard. The more I looked around, the more I saw people starting to question, starting to wake up from the fog that had clouded their vision. It wasn't always easy. Some people resisted, others were skeptical. But even the smallest shift in perspective was a victory. I didn't need to see dramatic changes or massive movements. I just needed to know that the message was reaching the hearts of those who were ready to hear it. And slowly, but surely, I began to feel that this journey, no matter how long it took, was worth it. I had been shown something powerful, and my role was simply to pass that along, trusting that God would handle the rest. As the weeks went by, I started to notice more changes in myself as well. It wasn't just about sharing the message anymore. It was about living it fully. The distractions that once consumed me, that pulled my attention in 1,000 different directions, began to lose their hold. I started to see the beauty in the small moments, in the quiet acts of love and kindness, in the simple joys that we so often overlook in our busy lives. I realized that living with intention, with purpose, was the true way to find peace. And in this process, I found a deeper connection with God, with the people around me, and with my own purpose in life. But even as I found peace in my own journey, I knew there was still so much more to be done. The world was still full of distractions, full of people who were lost in the noise. I couldn't save everyone, and that was a hard truth to accept. But I knew that the seed I had planted, the message I had shared, would continue to grow in the hearts of those who were ready to receive it. I realized that my role wasn't to force change on anyone, but to offer a glimpse of the truth, a chance for others to see the world in a different light. Whether or not they took that opportunity was up to them, but I had done my part. And in the end, that's all any of us can do. Share what we've learned, plant the seeds, and trust that God will do the rest. I'm glad you've made it this far. Share God's love with those you love, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos. See you.